The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar entitled Cooperative Purchasing Roundtable. My name is Matthew Darius. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator here at New York ASPO, and I'll be moderating today's call. We have three wonderful speakers for you today. First out, we have Paul Brennan, who is the Director of Purchasing for the County of Rockland. We have Mike Grade from the Cooperative Purchasing Network, and we have Peddler from Office Depot. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you've got a couple ways to interact with our presenters. The first way, which I'll be monitoring, is by using the chat window or the question window. Go ahead and type in whatever your question is. I'll monitor that, and I'll make sure to get the question answered for you. The other way you can ask a question is over the phone. To do this, you need to hit the raise hand button. It's a little circular button on your GoToWebinar control panel. Hit that. That notifies me that you have a question, and then I will unmute you and put you through with the presenter. Now, to use the raised hand functionality, you do have to have entered your audio pin into your phone, which is located on the audio pane of your GoToWebinar control panel. It's not hard to do. Just click audio. It'll tell you your pin. Type that in right now, and you'll be good to go. So that out of the way, our first speaker is Paul Brennan. Paul, it's all yours.
Thank you, Matt. This afternoon, I'm going to cover a number of topics, and then I'll turn it over to Mike, and then Pam will cover some additional topics after Mike is done. Very briefly, I'm going to be covering cooperative and piggyback contracts, a little bit of a difference between the two. Talk about the legal references for piggybacking in New York State in terms of the recent legislation. And we'll talk about analyzing cooperative contracts. And we'll also talk about NIGP standard for the use of cooperative contracts. NIGP is the National Institute of Governmental Purchasing, and there is a standard document of the use of government contracts and why government agencies should look to use cooperative contracts. There is a link on the handouts that you can go to the internet and actually download a copy of that standard. And hopefully that will be helpful to those people and organizations that are looking to use cooperative contracts. Okay, first in terms of recent legislation, GML 103 was amended to add a new section 16 that authorizes the piggybacking of certain contracts. This certainly gives flexibility to government agencies in New York to look at other contracts besides New York State contracts in order to satisfy the competitive bidding requirements. This new legislation may allow the use of certain national cooperative contracts based upon a number of issues, which I will discuss in the next few minutes over the next few slides. Certainly a lot of organizations have been being contacted by numerous national cooperative organizations that do exist and that are out there with contract vehicles that are available, and hopefully today's session will make it a little bit clearer what can be used and the steps you should take before using a cooperative contract. Guidance has been published by the New York State Controller's Office. That guidance is available on their website. If you Google and type in on their website cooperative procurement, they have issued a letter of guidance in relation to the new legislation. A copy of that controller's guidance is also available on the SAMPO, which is the State Association of Municipal Purchasing Officials website, which is www.nysampo.org. So certainly it's something that both the procurement professionals as well as your legal counsel may want to review that guidance before you start piggybacking other cooperative contracts. It is important that you do consult with your agency's legal counsel for assistance in determining if a contract can be piggybacked and if it's in the best interest of the agency to do so. Those are really the two things that the Controller's Office is going to look at when they come in and do their audits. They're going to look at is if the contract that you piggybacked was legally allowed to be piggybacked, and if so, what were the interest in your agency to do so. Keep in mind that every contract is different, so even if you look at piggybacking a contract, say from another state for a particular item, and then 6 months you're looking at another contract from the same state, every contract is different, so you really have to review each contract independently to determine if it does make sense for you to piggyback it and also if the legal requirements are met to go ahead and piggyback that contract. Right, so the legislation that was passed gives us a very broad definition in terms of what contracts can now be piggybacked. Previously, government agencies in New York were only allowed to purchase off of New York State OGS contracts and then county contracts within the state. This legislation now lets us piggyback contracts that are led by the United States of America or any agency thereof, any state, or any other county or political subdivision or district therein. So basically, gives us authority to piggyback all federal contracts as well as any other state contracts, any other county or political subdivision within another state, as long as that contract was let in a manner that constitutes competitive bidding consistent with New York state law and made available for use by other governmental entities. And there's really a couple key things to review on this particular slide. One is that contracts let by the United States of America. Our legislation has been very broad to give us the ability to use any contracts let by the federal government. However, you should be aware that the federal government has only authorized certain federal government contracts to be used by local governments. So those are the only contracts that we're allowed to use. Federal government contracts where the federal government has given local governments the authority to use them. Okay, let in a manner that constitutes competitive bidding. That means it has to be awarded to the lowest responsible bidder, and we will discuss that in a little bit more detail in an upcoming slide. And it has to be made available for use by other governmental entities. So there must be some clause in the contract that says other governments are allowed to buy off of that contract. So those are, and we'll get into that a little bit more detail, but in general, those are the three basic parts of the piggybacking legislation that everyone should review and understand. So what do we need to consider before moving forward and looking at other contracts? One, that we need to make sure that the contract must have been let by the United States of America or any agency thereof, a state or political subdivision or district therein. There are different types of purchasing cooperatives that are out there that are nonprofit organizations, and they may do the bidding themselves. That would not be an appropriate contract to piggyback. There are cooperatives that are nonprofits that operate under what they call a lead agency model, which means that they do not do the bidding as a nonprofit. They actually have government entities, counties, cities, states, actually issue the bids and award the bids, and they're just making that a cooperative contract after the fact. Those contracts can be piggybacked because they were issued and awarded by a government entity. So this really the main thing you want to consider is to make sure the contract that you're looking at was issued and awarded by a government entity. Okay, the contract must have had some type of piggyback clause in the contract that says it was available for use by other governmental entities. Okay, and it must be let in a manner that constitutes competitive bidding consistent with New York state law. And we'll go over what that means on the next slide here. All right, so the bids should have been solicited competitively through a public solicitation process. They should have been advertised either in official newspapers or websites, but there should have been some type of public notice and advertising in relation to the solicitation. Okay, the bids are to be sealed to guard against fraud or favoritism or collusion. So just as New York requires a sealed bidding process, the bids that you're going to piggyback had to be done by a sealed process as well. The specifications should be fair and open and not skewed toward a particular vendor. Those are the same requirements for the bids that we issue here in New York. So again, you need to make sure, look at the bid specifications to make sure that they were fair and open and encourage competition. Okay, and the bid goes to the lowest responsible bidder, and there is no process in which other bidders who are not the lowest bidders are encouraged to drop their prices for purpose of being awarded the bid. What this means is that it has to be a bidding process. The contract that was done by another state or another organization right now could not have been done through an RFP process where they've received proposals and negotiated with a number of vendors and then came to an award decision. So currently, as it stands today, if you're going to piggyback a contract from another state, federal government, another organization within a state, it has to have been a bid that was awarded to the lowest responsible bidder. Okay, some other things to consider. Like I told you before, federal contracts. Right now, the federal government has only authorized local governments to use Schedule 70 IT contracts, certain GS schedules under the 1122 program, and there's also some new schedules under a disaster preparedness and response law that was passed. So you have to make sure if you're looking at buying something off a GSA schedule, a federal government contract, that that particular schedule has in fact been authorized for use by local governments. And you can find that information on the GSA website. They do have a complete section that lists all the different schedules that are authorized for use by local governments. So I would recommend if you're looking at piggybacking a GSA contract, that you go to the GSA website to make sure that that schedule is permitted to be piggybacked. Okay, some examples of national cooperatives that you may have heard about. A lot of them have been contacting municipalities throughout the state since this legislation was passed. This is not an all-inclusive list, but just to give you some examples of the bigger cooperatives, there's U.S. Communities, TCPN, the Cooperative Purchasing Network, National IPA, Western States Contracting Alliance, National Joint Powers Alliance, and there's many, many more. Like I said, most of these will allow the government agencies to join for free, so there's no cost for a government agency to become a member excuse me, of these cooperatives. You can join more than one cooperative. For most part, there's no requirement that you're only allowed to join one. So you can become a member of many of these different cooperatives and then have the opportunity to access their contracts to determine if they're beneficial for your organization to look at using. Okay, some other things to consider. You're going to have to look at and review how each cooperative issues their bids, issued and awarded by a government agency, and how they award them. Are they awarding them to lowest responsible bid, which is what we're required to do right now, or do they award them by best value? In order to do this, you really need to review a copy of the solicitation. And that's one of the benefits of joining the different cooperatives that are out there. Then you normally gain access to their websites. And most of them have all the solicitation documents readily available on their website. So it's not something you have to call or email and struggle to find these documents. Most of the cooperatives have these documents right on their websites, so you as a government agency can look at them to determine how the bid was issued and how the bid was awarded. Okay. You should ask some of the following questions. Why is piggybacking the appropriate mechanism to use for this procurement? Why do I not want to issue my own bid, or why do I feel that issuing my own bid is not the appropriate thing? It may be a timing issue. You may have to procure something in response to an emergency situation where you have to procure it quickly, or you may have identified that there's probably more cost savings involved in using a cooperative bid, and we can talk about that a little bit more in the next couple of minutes. You should document what other procurement methodologies were considered. Did you consider using your own bid? Did you look to the New York State contract? Did they have it on contract? Did they not have it on state contract? You may find things that are on state contract. However, there may be a cooperative contract that has better pricing. All of that would be logical reasons of why you would want to use a cooperative contract, and you want to document these things that you've looked into throughout the process. Have market conditions changed since the original award? Price fluctuations, availability of supply. You may want to look at the bid that you're piggybacking to determine if the quantities of that bid were smaller or lower than what you're looking to purchase, then maybe you should try to even negotiate a better price because you're buying a higher volume. Depending upon the type of commodity it is, prices may have gone up or down since that contract was awarded. So again, you may want to look at that to determine to make sure that the price on the cooperative contract is still a fair and reasonable price. Prices that are on cooperative contracts are just like the prices on your own bids when you go out. It's a representative price on that particular day when you receive bids based upon the volume that you were buying. Doesn't mean it's absolutely the best price. It doesn't mean you're not going to find a better price a month from now or 2 months from now. So you need to do some type of due diligence to determine that the price is fair and reasonable. Okay. In general terms, what the controller is going to be looking at is really they're going to want to see that there was cost savings to your municipality in terms of using a cooperative bid. The controller's office is not going to, doesn't want to see the cooperative bid. The only reason using the cooperative bid is to satisfy the competitive bidding requirements. Now, certainly in cases of where you need things in a very timely manner, that is a good reason because doing a cooperative bid takes time. And it does cost money for advertising and things of that nature. So you can save money by not doing a competitive bid. There's administrative costs, the time it takes to develop the bid specifications, the advertising costs, the time to evaluate the bid. So there is definitely savings from not doing the bid. However, the controller's office is going to want to see that all looked at and written down in your procurement file that you took that into account. Okay, currently, based upon the controller's guidance, only contracts that were awarded through a competitive process and awarded according to state law, which is right now awarded to the lowest responsible bidder, may be considered for piggybacking. Okay, however, there is pending legislation that was passed by the Senate and the Assembly this past session that will authorize the piggybacking of contracts awarded by best value. So like I said, many of the other states and other jurisdictions in this country have been awarding their contracts by best value for years as opposed to the lowest responsible bidder. So many of the cooperative contracts that are out there are awarded on the basis of best value. As of today, we cannot piggyback those contracts. Hopefully in the very near future, the governor will sign these two bills, and then we will be able to piggyback contracts that were awarded by best value. Okay. However, there is a requirement under New York state law. That was other procurement reform that was passed in 2012 that now allows school districts as well as the municipalities to award purchase contracts and service contracts by best value. However, they have to pass either a resolution or a local law. School districts have to pass a resolution. Towns, cities, and villages and counties must pass a local law. So if the governor signs this bill, which we expect him to do very soon, you will be able to piggyback other contracts that were awarded by best value as long as your political subdivision has passed their required resolution or their local law that allows you to award contracts by best value. So very simply, if you haven't given yourself the authority to award by best value, then you can't piggyback a contract that's been awarded by best value. So you first have to give you authorization, which is allowed under GML, authorization to award your own contracts by best value. Then you will be allowed to use and piggyback other contracts that are awarded by best value. Okay. However, this does not mean that you cannot use these other cooperative contracts that were awarded by best value today. Okay, as the controller's guidance only covers items or services as it relates to competitive bidding statute. There are many things that we purchase which are under the competitive bidding statute. Okay, And every organization is required to have your own procurement policy under general municipal law. Within that policy, you normally have some type of guidelines of when you have to go out and get quotes. Over a certain dollar threshold, you may have to get 3 telephone quotes. A higher threshold, you may have to get 3 written quotes. Well, you can write into your policy today, if you want, that in lieu of getting quotes for things that are under the procurement policy limit, that you have the authority to make those purchases off of national cooperative contracts. So that way you don't have to go out and get the quotes. So there is an opportunity to use the cooperative contracts that are out there immediately while we wait for the governor's signature on this bill. So you're not totally barred from using a lot of these contracts. And in fact, in our own organization, we have started purchasing on things that we would normally go out to quote for by using several of the different cooperative contracts. So something definitely to take a look at. Certainly it was a way to get started with the process and become familiar with the cooperatives that are out there and what they have to offer, to take a look at some of the things that you need to quote out and see what cooperative contracts are available. Like I said, you may desire to allow purchases from piggyback or cooperative contracts in lieu of obtaining quotes for items under the competitive bidding threshold. And you can amend your own procurement policy to allow that. Okay, legal references, so you have them if you want to discuss this with your legal counsel. Chapter 308 of the laws of 2012 is the chapter that has the changes that allows for the piggybacking of contracts, and it added a new paragraph 16 to general municipal law. So that's a new section. It's at the end of general municipal law, section 103, and New York state laws are available online. So if you just Google New York state laws, you will come up with an index, and you can click on general municipal law, go to section 103, and then you'll find paragraph 16, which is the exact language that allows us to piggyback other contracts. And the Comptroller's Office, like I said before, has issued guidance on using these contracts back in November of 2012. All right, so now if we're deciding we're going to go through and use cooperative contracts, what are the steps in analyzing cooperative contracts to make sure that it's something that's good for us and benefits our organization? Certainly, as contracting workloads increase, purchasing requirements are becoming more complex, and budgets and resources decline. Government procurement officials are straining to meet these objectives and seek new and innovative tools to deliver efficient support to our organizations. And more governments are turning to the use of cooperative contracts. Most purchasing organizations and most municipalities in general have less employees now than they did 4 or 5 years ago. So everybody is trying to do more with less, and certainly the cooperative contracts are an area that can help us obtain value for our organization. However, you need to remember that cooperative purchasing can be well done, but it can also be done very poorly, and it's not without challenges. It's vital for procurement and public officials to understand the best practices and make informed decisions about the use of cooperative contracts as they would with any other procurement decision. Just because there's a contract that's out there and available doesn't mean it's a good contract. So again, it comes down to the due diligence of really getting those contract documents and reviewing them to make sure they meet the needs of your organization. And the National Institute of Governmental Purchasing has published a standard on the use of cooperative contracts. I would recommend that you download that and look at it. It certainly helps you and gives you some backup material if you need to make a case to superiors in your organization of the benefits of cooperative contracts and why you should use them. But it is considered the best practice to consider the use of cooperative contracts on a case-by-case basis. Kind of repeats what I said before, that every contract needs to be taken individually. Every contract is different. And only after due diligence has been performed. So you want to make sure that you've looked at it to make an informed decision that this makes sense for your organization. Cooperative procurement contracts are usually based upon the combined requirements of multiple organizations. Government entities can save time and money, obtain higher quality products and services, and standardize products and services using cooperative contracts. Now, most of the cooperative contracts, like I said, use the lead agency model where you're having an actual government entity issue an award to bid. And the benefit of that is that the bidders are being told that this is going to become a national cooperative contract. So hopefully that's encouraging more competition when they go out for bid, and hopefully it's ending up and resulting in lower prices. Okay. But it's up to each procurement professional to seek the guidance and to ensure that compliance with all applicable laws are met. So again, you want to make sure, you may have to talk to your legal counsel about a particular contract to make sure you're meeting all the applicable laws. Okay, NIGP standard says that after conducting extensive due diligence and market research, public procurement should, where permissible by law or regulation, consider the use of cooperative contracts in order to lower prices, lower administrative costs, increase competition, and obtain more favorable terms and conditions. When using cooperative contracts, attention should be given to ensuring legal compliance, open competition, and effective, efficient use of time and resources. All right, so certainly, the two biggest benefits that the cooperative contracts may offer, or piggybacking may offer, is one, lower prices, and two, lower administrative costs if you don't have to go out and incur the cost of bidding. You're still going to have to incur the cost of doing the due diligence, though, to make sure that the contract is something that benefits your organization. Okay? So what do you do in terms of looking and doing due diligence? So prior to making the decision to use a cooperative contract, you should basically cover a number of different things. One, you should compare cooperative contracts available for the required product or service. In most cases, there may be more than one cooperative contract that's available. So certainly you want to look at, if there's more than one cooperative contract, you want to compare them against each other. You want to conduct market research and evaluate whether the use of a cooperative contract is appropriate. Certainly, Google is one of the best search features that's available to all procurement professionals. If you want to try to find if the pricing on a cooperative contract is competitive, really all you have to do is Google contract award for whatever that item is you're looking to purchase, and you'll normally find information about other contracts that have been awarded for that, and you can find out pricing information to see what other people have paid for it. And that will help you determine if the cooperative contract is offering you a good price. You want to analyze all the costs associated with conducting a competitive solicitation. Certainly I would recommend that all organizations do that, so you can look at that on an annual basis and come up with what the minimum cost is for you to issue a bid. And so if it's $1,000 or $1,500, whatever it is, so at least you know immediately that that's a savings by using a cooperative contract. And that's some of the savings that you can build in to justify the use of using that contract. Okay. You want to make sure that the cooperative contract meets all the competitive requirements. I went through before, it's sealed, awarded to the lowest responsible bidder currently. In the near future, you should be able to do it by best value as well. But you want to make sure it was a competitively issued and awarded contract. Okay. You want to make sure that the contract complies with all applicable laws and best practices. In most cases, cooperative contracts, if they're issued within another state, you want to make sure that you amend on your purchase order that the laws of New York are going to govern the purchase, because those bids are written normally that the laws of whatever state that they're being awarded in are going to govern. And you certainly want to make sure that you change that and talk to the vendor to make sure that the purchase will be governed by the laws of the state of New York. So if there are any legal issues, they can be addressed here in New York. Okay. You want to analyze the product or service that's being offered, the price, terms and conditions, and other factors as the cost, shipping. Make sure that, is it shipping FOB destination, or is there going to be shipping costs on top of the price? That's certainly something to remember with most federal government contracts. While in New York and most state governments, pricing on state contract is delivered, FOB delivered, so the freight's always included. On most federal government contracts, that is not the case. Freight is additional, so you need to know to take that into account. You have to look at the federal government contract price, but then also find out what the shipping is going to be. You want to find out if there's minimum spend requirements that you have to meet in order to place an order. And again, the availability of the contract documentation. You're going to need to get a copy of the contract, a copy of the evaluation, a copy of the recommendation for award. And again, the cooperatives that are out there normally have this information available to you. Okay. This last bullet I already covered, making sure your local terms and conditions are incorporated into your purchase agreement, so they're governed by the laws of the state of New York. Okay. You may also want to incorporate or remove additional terms and conditions by developing an addendum, or just put them on the purchase order, but you should get the supplier signature on it that they have agreed to those terms and conditions. The other part of the NIGP standard, which the controller's guidance speaks to as well, is obtaining the necessary contract documents for your file. This is what the controller is going to look for when they come in and do audits. If you've done a piggyback procurement, they're going to want to see certain things, such as the solicitation that was issued by the agency, the bid tabulation or evaluation with the reason for the award, a copy of the winning proposal and bid, a copy of all insurance and bond certificates required by the contract. More than likely, you're going to have to go out and ask the vendor to supply you with your own insurance certificates, depending upon what's being purchased, so you're covered by being additional insured on the purchases that you're procuring. So that's another thing that you want to talk with the vendor to make sure that they will provide you with insurance as well. Okay, and those are the end of my slides in terms of what we should look for in terms of using the cooperative contracts. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and Mike's going to continue with some other things that you should be looking for throughout the process.
Great, thank you, Paul. I guess I'll ask you, Paul, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Paul said, I'm going to talk a little bit about requirements to use national cooperative contracts, sharing information on that, and then some examples of where you can find the due diligence documents from cooperative contracts. So much of this Paul touched on. There are a few important steps that must take place prior to using a national cooperative contract. First, and I think of most interest to everybody on the line today, for school districts, there's a need to pass a resolution authorizing the use of the best value award process. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Register as a member of the national cooperative you're going to use, and I, of course, included an S there should you choose to use more than one. And then conduct due diligence to analyze the cooperative contract to show cost savings and to ensure that the contract meets the requirements of general municipal law. And I've got a resource page called out here. You can visit the TCPN site and find information on these requirements, and then also templates for your local law or resolution. So the first step that I want to touch on is passing a local law or resolution. So within the new legislation that Paul referenced several times, S3766 in the State Senate or A5119 in the State Assembly, there is language that requires the passing of a local resolution for school districts in order to piggyback off of a cooperative contract awarded on the basis of best value. And I included the language right below, but you can see within this, it says no political subdivision or district therein other than New York City may use such a contract led on the basis of best value unless it shall first adopt a local law, rule, regulation, or resolution. And like I said before, as school districts, you need to pass a local resolution. And one thing that Paul has shared with me a couple of times in different situations is, as a school district, you sort of lucked out, so to speak, because passing a local resolution is much more simple than passing a local law. But obviously, cities, counties, towns, and villages, like you see here, are required to pass a local law. So then the next step is registering as a member of the cooperative. And this registration acts as what's called an intergovernmental agreement between your entity and the cooperative lead agency. And this can usually be done online on most websites for national cooperatives. And it's typically free with no minimum spend thresholds or usage requirements. So really, once you register as a member, you then, in many cases, can then view all contract solicitation documents and RFP documents from the particular contract you're interested in looking in. And then you also are eligible to utilize that contract once you've done your due diligence. I've got just an example on the screen here for TCPN. It's really just about a 2-minute process online. The most important piece of information being your tax identification number, which would show nonprofit status. But you see it's really just a 5-step process, takes just a couple of minutes, and once you've registered, you'd receive an email confirming membership. So the next slide is about conducting due diligence. And some of these points Paul did a nice job presenting. I wanted to share some additional information. So first, the cooperative contract must be analyzed to determine that the use is appropriate, it offers cost savings, and it meets the requirements of general municipal law. Paul talked quite a bit about determining whether the use of a cooperative contract is appropriate and shared some tips on how to do that. Pam is going to speak after me and talk a lot about cost savings and in particular walking you through the process of how you can show cost savings in the office supply space as far as a cooperative contract is concerned. And then I'm going to share some more information on the guidelines from the Office of Comptroller Services that was issued in November of 2012 and how you can access information from cooperatives in order to verify that those guidelines are met. So first, and these 3 bullets were really the 3 most important prerequisites that were included within the November 2012 bulletin from the Office of Comptroller Services. There were 3 prerequisites. The first was that the contract must be let by a public agency, and this extends to other states apart from New York. The second was that the contract must be made available for use by other governmental entities within the RFP. And then third, the contract must be let in a manner that constitutes competitive bidding for New York state law. And I will go through each of these prerequisites in detail in the following slides. So the first one, again, that the contract must be let by the United States or in any agency thereof, any state or any other political subdivision or district therein. So if you look at this here, you can verify, like Paul said, on most cooperative websites, information about the lead public agency or the governmental agency that did the contract that you're looking at. I've got some information here from TCPN where you can see contracts are let by Region 4 Education Service Center, which is a political subdivision of the state of Texas, and I included information about how education service centers were created by Texas and which applicable state statutes gave them their status in Texas. So you can see here basically that would be the first prerequisite. You'd want to verify first and foremost that the contract was in fact led by a political subdivision of the United States. The second prerequisite within the Comptroller's Bulletin is that the contract must have been made available for use by other governmental entities. And this is what's known as the cooperative clause or piggybacking clause within cooperative purchasing. And again, you'll be able to find any, I shouldn't say any, but for most cooperatives, you can view all of the RFPs on their website for the contract. So you'd be able to pull down that RFP and look for the language where it shows that it was made available for use by other governmental entities. Below, I've got information about each Region 4 ESC solicitation does contain that language. and the language is based on the lead jurisdiction joint powers authority or cooperative procurement authority. The third prerequisite is really the most complicated of the three prerequisites and is actually broken down into 4 elements. But the prerequisite states itself that the contract must have been let in a manner that constitutes competitive bidding consistent with state law. And again, like I mentioned, there were 4 different elements. The first element was that there was a public solicitation of bids. So you'll be able to verify that again through the RFP on the cooperative website. I've got a bullet here. Each Region 4 ESC solicitation is publicly advertised in the newspaper of general circulation, which is USA Today, and includes specific notice and instruction that includes a deadline of when responses will be received. The second element is the submission of sealed bids or analogous procedures to secure and preserve the integrity of the process and confidentiality of bids submitted. So here again, each Region 4 ESC solicitation requires all sealed proposals to be submitted by a specified deadline, and all responses received after that time are rejected and returned to sender. So just preserves, again, the integrity of that sealed bid process. The final 2 elements of the third prerequisite, the first one is that preparation of bid specifications or a similar document that provides a common standard for bidders to compete fairly. And in this case, Region 4 Education Service Center solicitations contain those uniform bid specs, and that prevents favoritism or preference, and then gives criteria for how that RFP will be basically evaluated and awarded. And then the fourth one, and this is really the element of this third prerequisite that led to all of the new legislation that we've referenced many times here today. The fourth one was that the award to the lowest bidder who materially or substantially meets the bid specifications and is determined to be a responsible bidder. And really after this element, it was determined that the majority of national cooperative contracts could not be used in New York based on this because most cooperative contracts are awarded on the basis of best value. And that led to the creation of the new legislation, which is S3766. And that new legislation will amend General Municipal Law 103, Section 16, to actually include the language that says that you can utilize a national cooperative contract if it was awarded per general municipal law or awarded on best value. And so makes that much, much more clear to allow for agencies in New York to utilize cooperative contracts awarded on best value. As I mentioned, most national cooperative contracts are awarded that way, so to really get the mandate relief and to really feel the cost savings from cooperative contracts, that legislation is necessary. I've got here contracts led by Region 4 Education Service Center for TCPN are awarded on the basis of best value, so cannot be used currently based on the legislation. But 3766 does allow for the use of cooperative contracts awarded on best value, which passed the State Senate and Assembly this summer, and we're hopeful to see that get signed by Governor Cuomo in hopefully short term. So that's the end of my portion today. I will kick things over to Pam Peddler with Office Depot.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
So, Mike, can you see my slides?
I cannot see it yet.
Okay.
I just turned control over to you. You got to tell the system you're approving the screen sharing.
Oh, people have, okay.
There you go.
And now I can see it.
Now you can see it? Okay, great. So first off, I just wanted to thank my co-presenters, Mike and Paul. Great information. It's been a pleasure to co-present with both of you. I also wanted to thank Matt for facilitating the webinar this afternoon and for all of you that have been able to join us. So we hope that we've been able to take you on a journey in the last hour and talk to you about what changes you need to make at a local agency or school level, what's happening with the legislation, what national cooperatives are out there, how to evaluate those national cooperatives. And now what I want to do is, from a vendor's perspective, talk to you a little bit about how do you go about documenting cost savings. So again, my name is Pam Peddler. I'm with Office Depot. Office Depot is a provider of office supplies, classroom supplies, furniture, technology, cleaning and break room, managed print solutions, and copy and print. And we have national cooperative agreements for all of those above categories. So what I just wanted to hit on briefly was just to go back and just revisit some of the key points that both Paul and Mike shared with us over the last hour, and that was a lot around due diligence. So I was taking some notes as both of them were speaking, and you know, one of the things that Paul spoke of was making sure that you've got your due diligence and your cost savings reports and analysis done, so when the controller comes in and looks at you being able to justify your decision as to why you chose a cooperative, do you have the information on the cooperative, and do you have documentation showing the cost savings? Also, when you're looking at these cooperatives and these vendors, you know, again, just going back and looking for reasonable price, the pricing and the reasonableness of the pricing, were savings available to your agency or school, and have you looked at all the factors associated with choosing that vendor? So while price is one thing and cost savings are very important, have you looked at the other key components in that agreement with the vendor and the cooperative with regards to, as Paul has stated, shipping, minimum requirements for shipping and freight, and you know, when are pricing updates handled and what's all included in the cooperative agreement, et cetera. So what we often hear in our category, being the office and the classroom supplies, is, you know, we have done our due diligence, we have put through our resolution, we've changed our local law, we have changed our procurement policy. We are now ready to talk to you, Office Depot, and look at your cooperative offering. So how do we go about doing that, and how do we go about comparing where we are right now with our vendor versus what your cooperative programs have to offer? And as any of you who are on the phone can probably attest to, when you're talking about office products, we carry anywhere from, you know, 20 to 30,000 different items. So what I have on the screen right now is what we've created, and we worked internally and we worked with external customers, and we've created a cost-saving analysis tool, and it's an Excel spreadsheet, and what it contains is information on the left-hand side that you, the agency or the school, would provide to us from your current vendor, and then we're going to populate it with information on the right-hand side that's going to give you Office Depot's item number, description, pack quantity, your cooperative price, extended price, and then savings. So on the current example that I have on the screen, as you can see, that in this particular, it's just a snapshot. In this particular snapshot, the customer was spending about $11,000 in office products. We came in at about $8,000, which represented a $3,000 saving, or about 25%. So what typically, when you're evaluating your office products, what we often hear from agencies and schools is, you know, the need, they only want to look at maybe their top 25 or their top 100. And my request to these agencies would be, let us take the time and put it on us to do the job for you, and put it on us to do the job the right way. And really doing the job the right way is evaluating your entire usage file for a 6-month, 9-month, or 12-month period. And again, if you can get that information to us in an Excel format from your current vendor, then we will work with our internal pricing group to convert those items, and then be able to provide you back with the cooperative pricing so that you can look at the savings. In this particular example, you'll see the customer did provide us with their current pricing and extended pricing. That's public information. If you're comfortable with that, that's great. And then if not, you can leave those 2 columns blank, and we'll give you a file back and you can populate it. But in this particular example, you can see, if you go all the way to the right, savings by line item, some items were higher on and some items were lower on. But at the end of the day, when we evaluated the entire usage, we were able to save this customer approximately 25% from what they were currently spending. So customers like this tool. If they can get their usage to us and they can get it to us electronically, they like this tool because It gives them a full picture. It's, again, a 6-month, 9-month, or 12-month snapshot of what they purchased, and you can stand behind this. You can put it in your file. If the controller wants to know from a cost-saving perspective, how did you come up with your number, the work has been done for you. One of the issues that sometimes comes up, and I'm hearing it a little bit more lately than I had in the past, is the inability, or customers are asking vendors for their usage and vendors aren't giving it to them, which is a little bit surprising, because if you're dealing with any of the big three, being ourselves, OfficeMax, or Staples, it should really be a non-issue, as well as some of the larger regionals. So if you're having a problem getting an electronic Excel version of your usage file, that should be a little bit of a red flag to you, because it's your information and we as vendors can get it to you in Excel, typically in a pretty quick timeline. So, so again, as long as you can get us that information, then we have the ability to take it, manipulate it, put the cooperative pricing in, and get that back to you. The other thing that you should be able to see on the screen, Mike, now is an Excel file. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what we've also created, and this kind of goes back to Paul's point about just understanding the difference in cooperatives, and this is available to any of you. So at the end, I'll give you my email address, or you can reach out to Matt, and I can get the information over to Matt. But in my particular category, the office and the classroom supplies, this is a tool that we created that just goes through and prompts you to ask some general questions about the cooperative. So as you can see, it's going to ask you the name of the cooperative, the lead agency, what are the contract terms, what's the pricing, your contract pricing, what does it include, what does it not include, when are your pricing increases, how often do you update your catalog, is there a rebate program, delivery fees, time frame, retail purchasing, references, memberships, and additional information. So this is just, it's available to any agency. It's just ask some general questions about what's going to be the best cooperative for you, for, in my particular case, office and classroom supplies, based on your individual needs and requirements. The other thing that's on that I wanted to just show you quickly was, this is the screenshot from before from the presentation. But the other thing I wanted to show you is that Office Depot also has the ability to provide you with an alternate file as well. So when we're doing that usage analysis for you, the first thing we're going to do, obviously, is make it an apples-to-apples comparison. If you say it's a blue pen, we're going to quote you back a blue pen. But if you're using a name brand pen, and we have an Office Depot private brand pen, and we have the ability to save you money if you use that alternate item, we will show you that as well, so that in the future, if you're looking for additional cost savings and you want to look at some of these alternate items, we can look there for savings. Typically, it's your paper items. Your toner is a great place if you're going from OEM to recycled, and then just switching out sometimes the name brand items to the private brand items. And then the last thing I just wanted to show you was, this is a template that you could actually send over to your current vendor, and this is the information that we're looking for. So this just gives them a template that they can follow and fill out for you with regards to what information we would want as it relates to your usage, so that we can do the complete analysis. So I'm hoping that it gives you a good overview as to one of the steps in regards to how do you justify your decision to go from your current program to using one of the national cooperatives and one of the vendors within the cooperatives. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. This is my email address, or reach out to Matt, and Matt will reach out to me. So thank you again for your time.
All right, thank you very much, Pam. We're going to move into our Q&A session now. If anyone has any questions for our three presenters, please either type them in the chat or hit the raise hand button. I'll put you right through. I will give you just a couple seconds. Go ahead and do that. All right, we have no questions in the queue here, so Paul, Mike, and Pam, thank you very much for presenting today. It was a great webinar. For all our attendees, we will be posting this on our website in case you want to refer back to the information. Hope you all have a great holiday weekend, and thank you for attending.